Thank you so much for the intro, Mike. Great to see so many users of Postman here. So the first time I met PayPal folks, that was at the API World Conference. And I think we were just like running over each other's booths that, how folks at PayPal are using Postman. And then we were like, yeah, how we would be using PayPal's APIs. And I had actually no idea that PayPal was kind of so invested with APIs. So kind of great to see that and great to hear that so many people are using Postman. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you're using Postman. And in the slides I have, I want to cover how kind of Postman has grown from as a side project to becoming what it is now, both kind of as a company and as a product. So just play this. OK, so Postman began as a REST client. Any users of Postman since kind of like way back in 2013, 14, anyone here? You had a couple here. So we had an internal kind of line here, like, we want to reward people who have been using Postman since it was blue. So it was like that blue REST client, and everything was like, now it's trying to change to become more of an orange-themed logo. I still love the blue color, but anyway. So it started as a REST client, and it was built as a side project because I just did not like working with curl. And this kind of went back to when I was like an intern at Yahoo in Bangalore. So I was given a project to integrate with the backend APIs at Yahoo. And the expectation was take this API call, kind of integrate it with the front end, and ship the build. And we'd always kind of make mistakes there. And the problem would come from just mistyping something, not seeing what the response was, lots of small issues that really slow you down. And this kind of carried off into the experience I had with my first company called Teleport Me after college. There I was doing both the back end as well as the front end of that API that we were building. And again, the same problem arose. So kind of got this experience that APIs and working with APIs is a problem at both small companies and small startups, as well as big companies like Yahoo, who predominantly run through APIs. And of course, I was kind of curious, like, why hasn't anybody solved this problem? So what I really simply wanted to do was just have a REST client. I want to construct API requests very, very easily, send them, get the right response, and not have to jump through like 50 different hoops to just see what's going on. And that resonated with a lot of people. Now, in that time, APIs were not like first-class citizens like the way they are now. Like people used to write code first, and APIs would be slapped on later. And API documentation was kind of non-existent, and the thinking was that we will kind of fix it later. So in that world, Postman kind of did its job, but this is what it kind of looked like. But now APIs in 2017 are kind of like the norm now. What we say is that modern software is effectively built on APIs. You're not going to think of software without thinking of APIs because you have APIs internally as microservices or like internal departments talking through APIs. And externally, if you're consuming SaaS software, you're ingesting a lot of APIs kind of externally. And it's kind of become the norm across like every engineering project that you do. Postman has grown with times to reflect that. And so has our user base. We have now more than 4 million users across the globe. About half of them are monthly active users. We have this notion of a Postman collection, if anybody uses collections here. So we have like 500,000 of them being created every month across the user base. And growing from a browser extension that was on the Chrome Web Store, we now have apps across all operating systems. And it also exists as a command line tool. And we also have a pretty robust API of its own to kind of help you integrate more and more with your workflows. And Postman now supports like all the stages of API development. So this is one hypothesis that we had, that a lot of friction that comes in developing APIs is just jumping from one tool to another. And these tools paradoxically kind of don't really talk well with each other. Like you would do testing in one tool, and you would do monitoring in another tool, and you would do designing in one tool. But none of these tools kind of share like a common language for themselves to talk about APIs. And what that meant was that every department would recreate this work over and over again. So somebody would write documentation on a website or in Markdown, and then people would manually kind of encode them in test cases. And then again, it would be done over with your monitoring systems, and when it comes to like publishing APIs externally, you just kind of keep doing this over and over again. So our goal as a company, which started in 2014, was to streamline this workflow. We envisioned that this should be super, super smooth. Just things should happen with the click of a button. And Postman is going to evolve to support all of these stages. So now in Postman, you can design APIs. You can start from scratch and create mock servers for your APIs. You don't need an external API to begin using Postman. Debugging, which is what a lot of people use Postman for, is already there. But growing from debugging, you can use Postman for automation testing. So whatever you feel like you are doing on a regular basis, you can automate and then plug into your CI/CD processes and have like a pretty robust test suite. You can create documentation in Postman. So instead of relying on Markdown files or things floating around in GitHub repos, you can have all your documentation, API documentation in Postman and have it developed in a much more collaborative way. We have a monitoring service that would take the same tests that you write in Postman, create in Postman, and you can run them on our infrastructure, and we'll give you like uptime metrics and performance metrics and the likes. We also allow developers to publish external-facing API documentation, so you can have a customized kind of website with your logo and colors, and all of that kind of just happens very, very smoothly. So as we were building all of these tools, we started looking at like the API ecosystem as a whole and just trying to find like our place and where this sort of fits in. And this needs to be compressed a little bit, but what we have is, from the left-hand side, we have people creating APIs who are API publishers, and kind of coming onto this side where you have API consumers. And a lot of effort in building companies in the API ecosystem was always on the publisher side. So you had companies like Apogee and MuleSoft and Mashape who were building management gateways and the likes. And the goal was always to satisfy like the workflows of the API publisher. And on this side, you had tools like Postman, but as we built up more and more of Postman, we realized that we have kind of created a new category of tools, which we call an API dev environment. So an API dev environment kind of combines all of these tools together. It's focused on the consumer. Of course, because consumers are consuming APIs, they are connected to the publishers, but it kind of brings all these tools together. And you have Postman, of course, which does all these things there. You have other companies too, and some of you might be users of some of these tools there, and they fit in like all of these kind of buckets. So now, what we kind of discovered with this concept of the API dev environment is that it kind of parallels what you do with your code in things like an IDE. So just like you have IDEs for software development, for writing code and debugging code, you have ADEs which are effectively helping you to build APIs. And they play well with each other. We believe that there is this flow from what you write in code in an IDE, and it goes over to your ADE, and they kind of complement each other with respect to making sure that the internal boundary of the system is in line with the external boundaries of the system. So typically, we saw people missing out on mocking and automation testing of APIs or doing integrated testing. So all of these things you would do in an ADE. And in your IDE, you would be, of course, creating these APIs and looking at like the inner boundary of your infrastructure. So now, having grown as a company, we have products across 3 categories. We have the free Postman product, which a lot of you would use. We actually have a lot of teams at PayPal who are already customers of our Pro product. They're collaborating using the features that we have in the Pro product, like the team library. They're using our APIs and stuff. We also have an enterprise product in the works, so I'm not going to go into the details of that. But that's where just like our product line falls under. So an interesting kind of observation that we have had over the past few years in growing Postman as a company is that effectively, through the support of the community and just through word of mouth adoption, and have grown from 0 to more than 4 million users. And the usage of Postman is predominantly starts with a single developer. And these developers then kind of start adopting these practices of sharing APIs, of collaborating on APIs, and they kind of cluster together in large teams. And again, we saw that happening at PayPal kind of pretty organically. So just from a business model perspective, what we have seen is that the more value that we kind of bring into the developer community, the more they kind of collaborate, the more they find value as a team, and they just kind of automatically help us succeed as a company. And across the years, just been amazed by the amount of feedback that we have received, and fortunately, most of that has been good. It's been bad as well at times. Sometimes when people hate on Postman, they like really, really hate on Postman. And it was just kind of very interesting to see some of those cases where Postman's kind of becomes such a really core part of that process, where if that API call that they're trying to send through Postman does not work, then like their day is ruined. So we have kind of built a company around the community in a way. Like we are very responsive to feedback, and that was kind of like this core thing that I saw as a developer while building Postman. So I was fortunately at that time, I was in Bangalore, and there was kind of nobody around who would give you feedback on a day-to-day basis. So I got in touch with a lot of developers in the Bay Area at that time. There were folks at VMware, Intuit, and eBay. So they would come to me with, like, okay, this is what we are trying to accomplish, this is what we are trying to do, and then, all of that would go back into the product and make the product better. As a company, we just have had to learn to do this at scale. We still, like, if somebody kind of comes in with an issue, that becomes our top priority, like not the roadmap or whatever we are doing, for that week. So it's great to hear that, we encourage that, and now with a user base of 4 million people, it's just like, that's the challenge for us. How do we kind of, incorporate all of that? So lots of stuff kind of coming up in 2018 and beyond. One of the things that we kind of noticed was that as we built more and more of these features, people still want more. We are still at the very beginning of solving some of these problems that come with API development. One thing that I'm pretty excited about is this concept of workspaces. So as we saw that people are collaborating with their teams, sharing APIs and working on APIs as a team kind of becomes the norm. Like, we have collaborative products in the form of like Slack and chatting applications, but our hypothesis is that every developer tool, or like any tool for that matter, would fundamentally have collaboration as a first-class thing, and that's what we are kind of doing with Workspaces. So you just kind of build your collections, you build your mock servers, you build your monitors, and kind of bring people in, and they will naturally like form a team and add things to those things that you build. Multi-team collaboration is something that we're really keen on exploring more this year. Just like PayPal has a lot of departments. How do we solve the problem of making these departments kind of talk to each other and making sure that API information that's embedded in someone's head on some team is percolated kind of across the whole organization. Template publishing, so if you've seen the latest version of Postman, you would see a tab there when you click the new button. I'll cover that in a bit. But you can now condense kind of all of these workflows that you would want to do with Postman in a small template. And instead of going through like APIs one by one and configuring them, you can just configure an entire template and just get your entire workflow done. We're going to open it up to the community so you can publish your own templates on Postman. On the long term, so if you use things like OpenAPI, Swagger, or any of these other tools, we get a lot of requests from the community to kind of integrate that with their Postman workflow. So we have a roadmap for that, and we're going to do this through a plugin model. We can't build like software for every description format out there, or for every version of that description. But our idea is to kind of get the community involved in building Postman and making Postman better. Some of this might come from the description authors themselves. Some of it would come from Postman, but we want to make sure that this community effort improves Postman for the long term. The enterprise group management feature is something that I don't think I need to go into detail here, but again just applies to companies at a scale of PayPal who just want all their developers to really work more efficiently. So that's all I had for the presentation. I think we have about like 5 minutes for a demo.
Yeah, definitely. Take as much time as you like.
All right. So just with a quick, show of hands, like how many people have used collections here? Almost all. Well, that's the first, and that's so good. So Sanjeev just joined in the team, and we've been talking about how some of these advanced features people really don't find out, but it's so great to see that you're using collections. Anybody who's using any of the advanced features in the form of like monitors or mock servers or documentation? Okay, just a couple. Okay, so I'm going to focus the demo more on that. So let me just try to bring it into focus. All right, so I believe this interface, everybody's familiar with. Just some quick tips in case, some quirks annoy you about Postman. So we have like a two-pane view, which you can toggle on the bottom right. So you can kind of see request and responses side by side. And one thing that some of our users like a lot is a dark theme. So I typically use the dark theme when I'm developing and I'm working in Postman, but for demos, the white theme kind of works better. So, I think starting with version around 5.4 plus, we have this new button that gives you access to all the advanced features in Postman pretty easily. And we have built workflows to kind of help you do all of these very simply. Of course, all of these are backed by collections and environments, things that you already know. But building them as a first step, like documentation and mock-server and monitors, is super easy through the new button flow. You also have the templates that I spoke about. You have a few here, and we'll open this up to the community, so you can get more templates in the coming months. And we also have this thing we call the API network. So any third-party APIs that you would consume would be documented here. And effectively, we believe this gives a window for publishers to address our developer community directly. So if you want to, I think we have PayPal here. Not in this one. Yeah, have something. So yeah, so you can just get a collection through the API network kind of directly. And we believe that this will help a lot in kind of getting the right API definitions to developers really, really quickly. So in this demo, I'm just going to build a quick mock server. Are people familiar with the concept of a mock server here? Have you used mocks internally? What we saw with mock servers was initially we thought that they are just like fake APIs. You would want to kind of build them on the side. But in a sense, what we see our users use mock servers as is decoupling kind of their development teams right at the beginning. So instead of using things like API descriptions where everybody has to check what's going on in the description file, you just spin up a mock server and just have your backend teams and front-end teams kind of work off the mock server. So in Postman, this is built on built through a collection. So you click the new button, kind of come to a mock server, you define a path here, and click the next button. I'm going to call it a name, and that's it. So your mock server effectively gets created, and I'm going to copy this request, and when I send this call, the response that I put in kind of comes back. So this is running off our SaaS service, and you can take this API call and plug it into whichever software project that you're building, or just with your own Postman testing, you can kind of use it to mimic kind of real APIs. What also gets created is an environment on the top right. So typically, the workflow is that you create a mock server, start building out your API, and in parallel, your backend teams are creating those APIs with code. When the backend API ships, maybe in staging or in production, you create an environment variable for that particular URL and just swap out all your workflows for testing and monitoring or whatever with the real API. And you kind of keep doing this back and forth. So to edit this mock server, I would use the examples feature in Postman. So examples are something that are part of a request. And if you don't use examples, I would encourage you to do that. You can store commonly used API requests here and kind of tie it all together to make a much more holistic documentation system. So these are editable within Postman. So let's say I wanted to send a header here. to save this, and when I come back, and oops. So this time, I'm going to get a JSON header, and then you can kind of build upon the response. So building a mock server kind of becomes really, really easy. There are no deploy steps. There's nothing to be done. It's just like the way you would be sculpting an API, you would get this mock server built out. And the feedback cycle kind of really quick. One of the things that we have seen is that people kind of have the real API on the left-hand side and the mock server kind of on the right-hand side. And it kind of gets done in no time. Along with mock servers, you also get API documentation. So if I click this button, I can see the documentation that was just created for that API. Whatever you add in Postman will get reflected here. If you are on the Pro plan, you would get a library of all your collections, so you can access any of the APIs that you use or your team uses really, really quickly. And you can really flesh them out. You can have proper markdown descriptions here. Examples would also show up on the right-hand side. And then, again, as these are effectively Postman collections, you can bring them back into Postman and play around with them. So that's just like a quick snippet of Postman features. There are lots of things that we can go more in depth into, and I'm happy to answer questions if you're interested in a specific feature. I would just encourage you to kind of check out these new things. They would add a lot of value to your productivity. All of these features are available for free. There are kind of no constraints on using these features. Once you kind of level up for actually using them in production quality projects, you can think about going to the Pro or Enterprise plans. So yeah.
All right, Abhinav, thank you. Thank you. Round of applause. Well, so I think what we'll do, look, it doesn't happen all the time where we have the CEO of a company come in and 2/3 of the audience use the product. So I want to make sure I give you guys enough time to ask questions. So I think I'm just going to ask you, I want to dig a little bit more into your journey just for a little bit, but then I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and I'm sure you have plenty of questions. So please think about them, or maybe even if there's additional demos. You're in your suite. I can tell you're in your zone. Like you're really excited when you actually get to show and demo the product, which is great. But for starters, Abhinav, I guess at what point in this journey of creating Postman did you know that this wasn't really just a hobby? This was really a business that you have created. Like, kind of walk us through what's going through your mind and what you're experiencing at that time.
So it happened, I think, in a range of different experiences I had. So I basically kind of never worked in a job. Like just after college, I started this company, which was doing pretty well, but not I didn't kind of see a vision there. And then I basically got burnt out and quit. And then my plan basically was that I'm going to hack on Postman. There were like 20,000 users there, and I was like, this seems like a lot of fun. I do something that adds a lot of value to people, and they experience that. And I think for 1 year, I just was like, there was no plan. I just wanted to kind of sustain myself as an individual, and then see where it goes.
And you were in Bangalore at the
Yes.
time then? So you're living in Bangalore. You don't really, there's clearly no business plan or anything like this. No. But you're doing this full time for a year, and you just know you got 20,000 customers that love your product.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
So along the way, I met Ankit, who's my co-founder and CTO now, and he worked with me at Yahoo. So we kind of both shared this pain of working on APIs together, and we kind of got in touch, and we were like, hey, lots of people are using Postman. They are coming to us with all of these problems. So what's kind of going on? Along the way, kind of in this process of trying to sustain myself effectively, like, you want like something to flow into the bank account. I was like, okay, really, really hitting zero. I ended up talking to a lot of companies in the Bay Area, like Mashup and Wrestlet, and they ended up sponsoring Postman for about $200 a month for getting their logo in one of the drop-downs. And I was like, people are, like, there seems to be that, people are paying money for something. I don't really know what it is. But, okay, one problem is solved, like, of basic sustenance. Interestingly, a lot of customers then, they were not customers then, a lot of users just sent checks that we love Postman so much, and, you are not charging for anything, so just take this money.
And this is unsolicited. You're not asking for checks. They seek you out because they want you to have some money, because they want you to be a going concern, because they love your product so much.
Yeah, basically. I think they just didn't want it to disappear.
Yeah.
And then I think the idea I could have, and the previous company was building apps, so I built this in-app purchase called Jetpacks. And the idea at that time was, it felt pretty funny that you have Postman, and then you get this jetpacks for Postman, and you have this Postman going around and dropping mail with jetpacks on. So I was like, okay, you buy this $10 purchase, and your Postman gets jetpacks, and people started buying that. So like the first check that came in was like for $600, and the next one was $1,000, $2,000. And then when the money really started coming in, I was like, Ankit, we really need to, whatever you're doing, you need to quit, and we need to start something together.
Wow.
So yeah, I think I was kind of like pulled into it, and I think it was a really good thing.
That's amazing. I love that. And then so at what point, so you were both in Bangalore, both in India at least, at that time. Mm-hmm. When did you decide to come over to the Bay Area and make that, walk us through that process?
So we had a pretty kind of interesting experience that I think is now probably documented in the Silicon Valley show, that we basically had a company, but we didn't really had a bank account or anything registered as a company. So we didn't intend to kind of raise money or do anything. Ankit and I, and eventually my third co-founder, Abhijit, we just liked working on Postman, and we had some money kind of coming in. So when the thing grew, we saw a lot of incoming offers for us to raise money, and it was kind of very, very fast and fascinating at that time. Like for the past 3 years, I was in this process of wanting to raise money, and nobody would listen to you or respond to you after a while. And here we had a whole bunch of VCs who wanted to invest. So at that point, we were like, okay, what would we do as a company? And looking at this feedback that was coming in primarily from the US and from people outside of India, we were like, okay, if we have to succeed as a business and as a company, we'd want to be here where our users are, and kind of talk to them, get their feedback in, and build this into a bigger product. Sitting there in Bangalore would not be enough. So when we started the company, it was this intention that we're going to grow this eventually to a point where we would move to the US.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of I don't know how familiar any of you are with the Airbnb story, but they were in YC, they're with Phil Graham. They're like, we're not getting much traction or anything like that, but he said well, do you have any users? Like, yeah, we have a bunch of users in New York, and of course they're in Mountain View at the time, and they're like, well, why the hell are you not in New York? So literally what they did was they got on a plane, they got to New York, and they started talking with their users. And I think there's something to be said of going to where your users are, which literally for you was on the other side of the world. I mean, that's not just going for a couple months to New York. I mean, it was literally going the other side of the world to be closer, to work with them. One more question, and then I will open it up to everybody here. But so in the journey that you've gone through, Abhinav, you've went through, from just kind of starting this business yourself, just really as a passion, to having employees with salaries and all this kind of stuff. As a CEO, what have been some of the challenges for you as you've kind of had to grow with the company?
So it's like a whole set of challenges that you kind of encounter, as you start a company and grow it. And I feel that it's better that people don't know those at the point of starting a company.
Because you never would start it if you knew everything you had to go through.
So that's kind of been my experience as well. But what I kind of learned along the way was, just a thing that you're doing as a single person is very different than a set of things that you do as a 3-person company. Because you want, the people that are working with you, and that was at that time my co-founders, you want them to, listen to the user feedback the same way that you do, build the product with the same kind of, passion and, detail that you want them to do, and that doesn't happen at times, right? In some cases, not intentionally, in cases, people miss things, and there is this, urge to go and fix it. And it would
Yourself.
be nobody's good at anything, and I'm going to fix it, and then things are going to be just fine. And they do for small problems, but the company doesn't grow. Yeah. So there is this constant struggle that I have to kind of go out of what I was doing. And then actually when you go out of it, then you find out that there are actually much better people than you to do that particular thing.
Absolutely.
So it becomes that struggle to kind of, first of all, realize that I'm not, on an average, I can do this, but I'm not good. And then, you have to then hire the best people for that job. And when they come in, then, you kind of have to build a system in which they can do their best work. So that's kind of been my biggest challenge in learning. And doing that across like Bangalore and San Francisco now, that's I think another level, the difficulty level kind of just went up, which I did not anticipate at all. Like coming to SF was just founding the company from scratch again.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you work a lot of 24-hour days, potentially, dare I say. It was just like, your day doesn't end having two offices on the other side. Okay, so audience, I'm sure you guys all have questions about the journey, the product, if you want to see any more demos, anything like that. What questions does everybody have here? I'll come around with the mic. Yes, of course, in the back corner.
Hey, Abhinav. So I just want to piggyback on the questions that how your journey has evolved. I'm sure like your initial product should have been Wits 360, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Which was super helpful to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was just interested to know, how do you pivot from one idea to another? Like, how do you know what this thing is working? It's a great product. I think it evolved to panoramic views and stuff. But how do you pivot from one idea to another, saying, no, this is my passion, or this is the thing that's going to work?
That's a really good question. And I don't think like at that point I really thought about it kind of consciously. I feel as a person that, whatever you create kind of has a little bit of kind of you in it, and if you kind of really care about what you're building. And I think it was really hard for me to, kind of say that at least my work there was done. I think it was the set of like Postman users at that time who had, it was like an avalanche of things, and it was not like at that time I was getting like, bits of encouragement, like good work and keep it up. It was like really pages worth of like, feedback that this is our workflow, this is where the problems is, this is where Postman fits in. I ended up talking to folks at Google who featured Postman on the Chrome Web Store, and a whole bunch of things happened. And at that time I went around, showing Postman to other people in Bangalore and to, folks there that, hey, I'm building this thing. This seems like a really good idea. What do you think about it? And everybody was like, yeah, it's cool. It's a developer tool, but I don't really care so much. So I think I kind of got in this mindset that, there's something really wrong in the world here, and I need to fix that. And on this side, maybe panoramic technology will evolve in whichever way, but I didn't feel very strongly about solving that problem anymore.
Thank you.
Other questions, audience?
No, so I just wanted to check, so just on the continuation of the same question. So what do you think was the main factor which would say like these are the features I would want in the Postman product? Was it the networking which really helped, which helped you to gather the feedback? Because most of the time it's like, as a single person you won't have enough ideas. So definitely you'll be like, you'll be done with the ideas. So what is the most important aspect of it which would ask you to just put all these features into Postman? And other question was mostly like during the journey, did you any point in time see just thought about it, I should stop this and just join the regular job? And how did you cope?
So the second one is easier, which is no. So the first one is actually harder, and I kind of thought about it a lot, like why sitting in Bangalore, like as a single developer, I had this idea. And I think a lot of ideas and entrepreneurs and startups are kind of a product of more of the environment around them. And like effectively, Postman was born as an idea over like 2.5 years of kind of gestating and thinking about what the real problems are. And as an entrepreneur, like with really good startups, you would see that they kind of internalize the problem very, very well. And I believe like there are a lot of ideas I had at that time. As I was saying, right, like I was in this path towards basic sustenance. I wrote out a list of like 24 ideas that I could do, and at the top at that time was Postman. So I looked at what exactly was was happening, and how many of these ideas kind of I have seen personally, right? Like as you see kind of people struggle with them, and you build a hypothesis, and then you kind of validate it with what the feedback is. And I feel like with Postman, something interesting that has happened is that once we build something and we build it with real clarity on what we are trying to achieve, it helps us see like a little bit more of the picture, right? We didn't envision that we're going to build like mock servers or monitors or anything of that sort, but you kind of start seeing like these interconnected set of ideas there. And then right, even right now we try out like different hypotheses. We see that okay, this works, and sometimes it's as simple as somebody discovering something in Postman and we building it as a feature for the rest of the community. So I feel like that initial clarity is like really, really important to have. And wherever startups kind of don't have that clarity, it kind of fizzles out. But you have to kind of keep that way of operating really on. And that's been again one of my struggles in growing the company, that we don't do something stupid or don't do something that's like really something that nobody wants. Because you would get like some 400 feature requests. Which one do you prioritize? Which one do you really go for? And we try this test again, where okay, is that really needed? Is that a hypothesis that we have had and it complements something that we thought? And then go to the next stages. And that's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, so I'm curious how you grow your first 20K users. So basically you have your solution, the Postman, in your own computer. Then how do you let others know and try? How do you grow the initial user basis?
So I can tell you about my experience, and which was I believe it maybe can't be replicated. Depends on the context that you have now. So for Postman, what had happened was that at that time there was a distribution channel in the form of the Chrome Web Store, right? So Chrome Web Store had kind of just come out. So building an app was kind of easy, and then Chrome Web Store acted as a distribution channel. And what happened was, I believe a lot of people were looking for REST clients. So they would look at the, they would search for a REST client, they would land on the Chrome Web Store, and immediately get Postman. What I did do consciously, I mean, again, I'm kind of going back on that time. Like the things that I did do consciously was, I posted an answer on Stack Overflow that just got upvoted like crazy. And for 1 year, I was very, very happy about my Stack Overflow rankings. So I was like really happy that my rankings are going up. But it still is like the top referral source for Postman from a website. And wherever people are searching for your product, I believe you need to be there. You need to talk their language, and get them to get your product, and they should get value out of it. The second thing that we did, I believe, which was really valuable, was that Postman had a unit of information that could be shared. So the notion of a collection, that if I build something and it can be shared and somebody else can get value from, that acted as a viral mechanism for the first set of users to get other people to use Postman, and not just tell them that, okay, go and use Postman, but really give them a unit of value that they use and consume, and then it kind of, the chain goes on. And I believe that it's the same process that happens till now, right? Somebody discovers Postman, build a collection, and then give it to someone else, and they start using Postman. So I believe that helped quite a bit.
When I started using Postman, there were a few other REST clients, but what I liked about Postman was the design. So apart from features, how much priority you give to the design of the Postman, because it really distinguishes it from the other products, other REST clients, basically.
Yeah, and I kind of feared all those other REST clients at that time. I think there was advanced REST clients that was really popular, and whenever I'd go to people, be like, okay, use Postman, I'd be like, I use advanced REST client already. I think for me, actually, like the design of the product is more important than any single feature, because coming from that experience of using curl and struggling with curl at that time. I mean, not to hate on curl, like it's a really good tool, but just the struggles of that experience that you have with working with APIs. That's what really I think helped me prioritize what to focus on, because sending an API call is not really such a big deal, but how do you consciously kind of work with APIs on a day-to-day basis? Building that right was a bigger problem. So I think it helped a lot that I was a developer who had also built APIs, and I also did design on the side. Like my side job at that time was a UX consultancy that I did. So I really try to kind of bring those ideas in, making sure that the design takes priority over other things. And you actually find out that with a much more focused approach, with a very limited feature set, and solving just like that one problem gets you many more users than an assortment of features. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was much more important than building features. And then I think also seeing that we want to simplify this process a lot for everyone, and not just for like the most competent developers. And that's something that I've been really happy with over the past few years, that not only do developers who would already know code or know all these tools would work with APIs, but also people who have never touched like a line of code can also now get some value out from Postman. And that again becomes one more point for us to simplify and build the product the right way.
So, yeah, okay. So I have two questions. The first one is like, can you elaborate more on the integration with Swagger and like what we can expect to see, like, because it'll be a really useful tool for a lot of API development as well. And the second question is, you said that a lot of companies didn't really care because it was just a developer tool. So like how did it grow to this extent? Was it just the word of mouth, or did you seek companies to say, hey, you can integrate this into your development? And like, was there any point in time where you seeked out companies to?
Sure, yeah. So let me answer the first one. So Postman and the idea of an API description format kind of arose around the same time. Basically people saw that there are lots of APIs being created, and one way to solve some of these problems are through an API description format. And of course, along with it, you need something like Postman to send these calls and do other things. So our observation has been that there are lots of description formats out there, like Swagger is one, and there are actually many more now. You have GraphQL, you have you had API Blueprint. I'm not sure if they're still active, but you have RAML, and you kind of go far back. You have SOAP and all of these different ways to describe APIs, right? And Postman is a more fundamental tool there, which is supposed to help you with APIs, whether it be documented in OpenAPI, Swagger, or GraphQL. So we already have importers for a bunch of these formats in Postman. So you can import a Swagger file and convert the Swagger 2 thing to a Postman collection. As we saw this grow, I think we want to scale this up where you can put your own converters in. You would be able to install plugins in Postman, and then on the long term, you would be able to kind of store the description file in Postman itself. So you would keep that description file there and create more collections, or link them with any collections that you have. Link them with that description file. So the integration would, in my mind, would go both ways. You would have collections which would give you data about how the API is working or what you are doing with that API, and the description file which you would update on a continuous basis. Because that's what we hear from companies a lot, that yes, we build description files and we have tons of these formats, but nobody really agrees on one single thing, and then keeping them at parity with all of these different components you have becomes really, really hard. And eventually the description file is thrown away, and we have seen that cycle kind of repeat. So what we want to make sure is kind of bring them in as like first-class objects in Postman, and make sure there is flow back and forth. So does that give you a good idea about where we're going with this? Okay. So the second thing is I don't have a very concrete answer on it, but I feel like we kind of stumbled upon something that is a real need. When I went around and spoke to companies or engineers at companies, everybody said that they had a notion of a REST client in the company. So people were writing their own REST clients, they were building libraries and frameworks, and of course theirs was the best way, right? But when you see it like across 100 different companies, you see that everybody's trying to kind of solve the same problem over and over and over again. So when Postman goes in and you have collections and other things that you can build in Postman, slowly we saw those REST clients being replaced by something that everybody could agree upon as being a good tool. So I feel like the need was already there, and we just happened to be at the right time. This thing.
Hi. So just like my question is more surrounding like your journey and how you sort of evolved to this phenomenal product. What is really interesting to me, I had never heard of Postman before this session, and because I have a habit of like stalking every speaker session that Mike has over here. So what's really interesting to me is there are very few successful SaaS-based startups that start off in India and are like globally so powerful and influential. So I know you touched upon a little bit about why you moved to the Bay Area because a lot of your users were here, but I'm curious if the nature of the startup ecosystem in the Bay Area itself was a great impetus for you to make the move from India to the Bay Area. As somebody who had a miserably horrible experience as a SaaS startup out of college itself, I know that there's not a lot of support or understanding of SaaS-based startups. So how much of that made the difference when it came to Postman's success?
So, I mean, thank you for all the nice words, right? I would say that, we're still on that journey, right? Like, it's still, like, there's a long way for us to go, and we have hit some milestones. So overall, there's still a long way to go. What I feel, I'd like to kind of break that question down, right? Like, okay, moving to the Bay Area, in general, why do we kind of do that? So one of the things that you find out in an ecosystem that is still developing, that if your model demands people who have not built or have not worked in that model, you have to do a lot of explaining and a lot of like seeding up of different traits and capabilities in the people who work with you. And I believe like India is matured like really fast as an ecosystem. Like there are lots of good companies now, and they were not there when I started out. But it's still relatively, it's kind of young. So what we felt was that as the company grows, you want to make sure that you have the right support at the right time for what you want the company to do. So building a SaaS business, like again, we did not start with building a SaaS business, right? We wanted to build a good product, and SaaS is something that is more of a model in which you charge people and deliver your software. It fits naturally into what Postman offers. So in our experience, what we have seen is that even like the way we do business is relatively kind of new, and it's being adopted more and more, even with Bay Area companies. And if I think about it, I believe that if you are kind of like product first and user first, all of these things kind of are a wrapper around it, and you actually should think that way rather than thinking of like, okay, no, I'm going to build like in this model or that model, because you might end up like harming your users or do certain things which are not right for the product. So I feel that we have stuck to that product first thing, and then the model kind of came around. And because we knew that okay, at a certain stage of the company, we'd need this kind of support. Being in the Bay Area and being in Bangalore would be a good mix.
I think we're going to do one last audience question. Then Abhinav, I want to give you also a chance to frankly ask any questions of our audience. Since you got a whole room full of users here, and I know how you love user feedback, so I want to give you a chance to see if any folks in the audience want to answer questions you might have.
Hey Abhinav, my question was more a curiosity. How do you make money now? Because I bet most of them in the room are using the free app like I do. So how are you making money?
Well, maybe next time around when I'm there and I ask like who's using the pro product, everybody raises their hands. But, I mean, so that's how we actually make money. We have two plans, pro and enterprise. The idea that we had was that we are providing a set of services for people to kind of get value from. Everybody should know that you can do that in Postman. So, for example, like the mock servers that I demoed, you can send 1,000 calls to the mock servers for free, and it's available to kind of everyone who's using Postman once you sign up for an account. If you want to use more of those, you can buy an $8 per user per month subscription, and then you get like 1 million calls per month. So that's the model. On the pro side, we also have a collaboration tool, and that we believe is like the real driver of the revenue. Where people want to kind of come together in teams. They don't want their API definitions to kind of be floating around, and they end up building like the source of truth inside Postman. So that's kind of like the draw for the paid product. We have seen a lot of success, like again, just with the pro product, we looked at user feedback and then built a model around it. We have seen the same with our enterprise product, where people want features like single sign-on, audit logs, multi-team collaboration. And we saw that coming from kind of large companies themselves, that we are using it in these different buckets. So I would want to consolidate all of this. So that led us to kind of like the enterprise model. We are pretty excited about what's 2018 is going to bring to us. Till now, it's been pretty fascinating to see how even for the paid product, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it's going to grow more.
So you're no longer relying on people to send in paper checks.
Basically.
Okay. Abhinav, what questions might you have for users in the room? And I could hand out the mic if somebody wants to elaborate on that.
Sure, yeah. I think I'd love to know, like, if there's anything that you would want us to work on or prioritize, anything that you felt was a really big need that we are not addressing or is not on the horizon.
CEO here, he can control the roadmap. What is it that features you want to see?
Working on mobile at PayPal, we're switching from JSON to protobuf. Is there any plans for protobuf to be supported in Postman?
Through the plugin architecture, probably, right? So what we started doing was late 2017 was started abstracting out kind of all the components of Postman. So we could replace like the HTTP layer or like the collections layer and bring in these plugins to let you translate API calls going back and forth. So I think with the combination of like schema and plugins, we will get protobufs in. It's in my list of like all the schemas to kind of scratch out one by one.
Thank you.
Others? Feature requests. Come on, people. You don't have to build them.
Anything that you hate about Postman.
Or any other questions? Anything else that you might want?
Anything that you hate about Postman that we should really, really fix like right now. Well, that's good.
Do you have it, like, what is your NPS score? Do you guys measure that or anything? I'm feeling it's through the roof right now.
We don't measure it. We have seen some third-party services do it for us, and thankfully it's all been high. So, but I don't know the scientific validity of these scores.
Time for maybe one more question, comment, anything? No? Maybe Abhinav, any closing thoughts, things you want to leave with people, anything like that?
I just have a different question.
Yes.
So how has your immigration experience been?
Can we turn the recording off now?
You guys will stick around for a few minutes after, so we can probably talk offline on that. Big thanks to Abhinav for coming out. Thanks to Postman for making so many happy users in the room. This was great, and we do have stickers in the back for anybody that wants to, I assume laptop stickers, or, yes, yes. Laptop stickers in the back if anybody wants to grab them. And again, we'll probably hang out for a little bit if anybody wants to ask some one-on-one questions. Big
Sounds
thanks.
great. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.